what we're going to really dive into today is Podio for solar. So really focusing specifically around the solar energy industry, which has been really growing over the last few years, especially with a lot of different government incentives. And we've seen a lot of really fun use cases and how this can benefit both sides of the team. So we wanted to make sure that we were highlighting that for everyone today. So for Podio for Solar, everything under the sun. If you've been on one of my webinars before, you know I can't help but make a pun, so we had to have something fun there, but covering everything from pre-sales to installation. My name is Mac Flintosh. Please forgive the date on the bottom of that slide. I could not get that to edit, but I am the Podio Solutions Engineer over here at the ShareFile Business Unit, joined by my Senior Technical Support Engineer, Kelly Markoff. Kelly, you want to say hi?
Hello, everyone.
Wonderful. And again, the first thing we want to go ahead and just touch on is a quick thank you. So thank you everybody for attending. We really appreciate the time. We appreciate anyone who's looking at Podio that perhaps hasn't seen us before, as well as all of our continued customers. Please let us know if any questions that come through. We want to make sure we're just giving you the best resources possible. Today we are featuring one of our very favorites, Jacquelyn May of Zooli. So you may recognize that name if you've been with Podio for quite some time. Jacquelyn actually used to be on our team, so she really has more knowledge than anyone I've ever met when it comes to Podio. She's branched out and become one of our preferred partners with Zooli.io. So that's that website. You can plug that into that browser, be able to see some of the things she's been able to provide. And that email below that is kind of how you'd best be able to reach out to her. So Jacquelyn, if you want to say a quick hello, quick little introduction or anything, and then we can go ahead and move through.
Hey, everyone. Yeah, thanks for that great introduction, Mac. And yeah, looking forward to today.
All right, wonderful. All right, cool. Again, just a reminder, we are a part of that ShareFile business unit. So if you are seeing ShareFile in any of these slides or communications, that's all part of that same family. And from there, we can go ahead and jump right in. So going through just some of the basics with Podio for anyone who hasn't seen the platform before, I'll keep this part really brief. But Podio as a whole is really made up of these two different silos as far as how you can access your information. So those are referred to as workspaces and apps. So your workspaces are always located in this drop down in the left-hand side. And this is really how you're choosing to organize or bucket your information together. So a lot of times we'll see different workspaces for different departments. In this case, you may have a workspace for your accounting department, your pre-sales or sales department, and your installation department, just to make sure each of those teams have their own environment. The nice thing is, however, you can have things connect across workspaces. So for instance, a pre-sale or a deal can push through to that more of a project stage. So you can always have that linked back as you're doing the different phases of that install. The other main part of Podio, and this is what really holds your data, if you will, are what we call apps. And those are those icons I have across the top here. We use that term app differently than most other companies. An app in Podio is solely just your template, so the fields that you want to be able to manage. In order to get those, you have your add app button here where you can either create your own. That's what the one that I've done today has been one I've created. Very simple, just drag and drop. Or you can go into our app market where we have more of a sort of, I don't want to call it a shell, but more of an environment of preset templates that you'd be able to pull into your own workspaces and still make modifications there. And then what we're looking at on this page is sort of the workspace homepage or workspace dash. On the left-hand side, you'll always see that sort of running activity feed. I can see my users. And on the right-hand side with these tiles, you can break that down for whatever sort of quick information you and your team need to access. So this can be reports based off of install stages, the different deliverables of that install stage, the deal stages, task lists, calendars. It's totally up to you. Last but not least, for the basics, we do also have a built-in chat feature. I really wanted to put this out on that pre-sale side of the solar energy business and the fact that a lot of people are in the field constantly. So being able to have that chat feature is very helpful. You can do individual or group messaging. And since Podio does have a mobile app, this can be accessed directly through the phone or through a tablet if someone's going door to door. All right, great. So for that, I can go ahead and hop into my sample template here. So for this, I've created something that I've just called Solar Test. This is going to be a sample of a template of what someone would be able to pull up. This can also be turned into a blank web form if you prefer maybe someone outside of your company that's submitting deals, just be able to get deals to you, not necessarily log into the platform, but give you an idea of different sort of fields that can be captured here. At the very top, I have just my client name, client email, phone number. Again, all this can be plugged in right when they're on speaking to the homeowner. For Spanish-speaking customer, I do like to point this out if there's a different language that's heavily spoken in your area. When we start talking about things like automation, so whether it be templated email follow-ups or quote PDF generation, if it is someone who is heavily speaking more so in Spanish than English, you want to make sure that that communication is going to them in the way they're going to best receive it. So when we start talking about automations, I can come back here and kind of highlight how this can be helpful. Continuing down, I have my salesperson, my closer. So basically where that deal is going to be pushing for, that sort of in-person appointment. When I have my first contact versus follow-up date. So great for making sure you're staying on task and none of those leads are falling through the cracks. Whether it's a residential or commercial deal, as you all know, those are going to have very different workflows and different next steps required. Some need a little bit more hand-holding, so it can kind of set those workflows in place. For stage here, you can really customize this however you want to. So this is just whatever sort of buckets you want to put a deal in, from first contact to closed one. All of that, again, completely customizable. For something like that on a demo space, I like to keep it a little bit more generalized, but know that all that can be changed. I have an area here where the individual can attach just a photograph of the most recent phone bill or the proof of insurance so that you have all of that in the area that you need it directly on this record. When that appointment date might be set. For this nice little address field, we do have a built-in integration with Google Maps. So with that, I just plugged in our office address. I can get that nice clean map view. If I was to click that, it's going to bring me directly into Google Maps where I can get driving directions or just send it right to my phone. So again, a great way to plot, and especially then if that closer is going to that property within the next few days, they can just pull up that item in Podio and know exactly where they need to be. Once we get past that first contact stage, things we want to track are things like number of panels, number wattage, any sort of notes that you may be taking. You can see mine are very in-depth. Any sort of deal value, and I have some calculations that are built in here as well. So for instance, let's say I wanted to change that to something slightly more realistic, but if I bring that down to closer to 35K, Podio does have the ability for calculations. So what I was able to do here is say, the closer commission is going to be 5%. The salesperson is going to be 3%. So that's what each individual would make if this deal closes. Great for forecasting, great for budgeting. And then at the very bottom, I have both of those totals deducting from the total deal value. So you as a business owner can get good visibility onto what the deal value is to you after any sort of incidental costs come through. Now, as we all know, a lot of these deals require so much paperwork as far as making sure you have any sort of inspection records, again, proof of all those different types of insurances, specs that you may need to be creating or having hold of, details on the different tools that you're using, details on the types of panels or the types of converters. So with this, we have this nice option to be able to add files. You can pull directly from your desktop, should you have that saved just directly from your desktop. We do have integrations with several other services. So just those ones listed here. Obviously, the one with ShareFile is us being a part of the same business unit is a bit stronger. But the way that that integration functions, if we're using one of these third parties, is it's a live link between those two systems. So if I'm constantly updating this folder, putting more documents in, maybe editing documents that are in there, if I have that just from my desktop, I would need to come in here and replace that every time. Since if that's coming from the desktop, it's a full download. If I'm using something like ShareFile where I just have that folder linked, I'm always going to have the most up-to-date version of that folder or that document linked into this item in Podio. So I never have to worry about working off outdated information, and it's just a nice clean path to be able to access that data. Underneath files for tags, this is great if you're sort of running any type of campaign that you want to measure. You can create one off the spot, or you can pull one that you've created previously. And you're able to search, filter, and report based off of those tags. So just another way of thinking how you can group these sort of leads or these deals together without necessarily needing to rely on a category field every time. And wonderful things for tasks. Let's say I wanted to make sure I'm following up. I can go ahead and assign that to a specific user, set that due date, put any notes in here, learn how to spell correctly. There we go. And I'll go ahead and create that task. So now I can get that full task list of any actions that would need to occur on this particular item. Cool. So it's sort of a summary of just how this template can work. When we start talking about things like pre-sales for solar, that's where that automation step can be really, really beneficial. That's going to be on that Podio premium plan. So you can go so far as to say whenever a new lead is either saved in Podio or submitted via that web form, I want XYZ to occur. So I want it to assign to a specific person. I want it to automatically be in that first stage. I want a task to generate out so that follow-up is within a certain time period. So you're able to really customize what that's going through. And the way that those automations function are basically through what we call conditional and trigger workflows. So conditional is really logic-based, a lot of if-then statements, if I've selected this and that, I want this to occur, so on and so forth. Your triggers, whatever is actually kicking off your workflow. So that could be, as I've mentioned, an item being created. That can also be something like a status being changed or a task being completed. So you really get the ability to define your entire process, how you want it to look for your company, as opposed to how I want, or as opposed to being locked into somebody else's particular setup. The reason I wanted to mention that really is because of what I had mentioned right here. So if you have those sort of unique identifiers, I can use this as a condition for that workflow. So in this case, I have, yes, this is a Spanish speaking customer. So when I get to the stage where maybe it's sending out a templated email or it's sending out a templated SMS message to let them know that we're coming for that set appointment, I can make sure that if it says this is selected, I want to have my Spanish template to go through. If I have it set where that is not selected, I would want my English language template to go through. So it allows you to really customize and go that sort of extra length without any extra legwork, because once those rules are set, those will go through every single time. Okay. So again, we can go through that whole deal process. If you wanted to use this more so for that pre-sale side as opposed to the quoting portion, you can. If we wanted to manage the entire deal through here, you can. But the big question is, once it's done, let's talk about the install side. So once we have everything across the line, now what? So what can an install project look like within this particular platform? And with that, I want to pass it to the wonderful Ms. Jacquelyn May. She is very, very strong in this space. I love the way that she has this laid out, and it's just a good way to get a visual of a sort of industry specific breakdown of how this can look like for you guys.
Thanks, Mac. Yeah, so I'm just going to walk through kind of like a great starting point for solar companies. I want to emphasize, and I know Mac highlighted this a lot as well. This is really just a starting point, and you can really build this out and customize it as much as you want. So that being said, I will go ahead and share my screen. Okay, so since we're already kind of familiar with the structure that Mac went over, so this is a starting project management workspace. I will typically get companies started with this, and then we'll just build it out kind of as we go. I've worked with several different solar companies, and everyone kind of has their own idea of how they want to get things done, which makes Podio a perfect platform for it because of how customizable it is and how you can really automate anything that you want. So everyone's setup kind of looks a little bit different, but I find that using this structure, which I'll go over, kind of sets you up for scalability, and just making sure that things are organized in a way that everyone knows where to find what they're working on, without it kind of getting too cluttered up, and kind of hard to find certain pieces of information. So with that being
really
said,
quick before you pop in there, let's say I already have a different sort of CRM, if you will, in place. Would this sort of the install or the project side of that, can we still be able to leverage this if we're not using it for the full kit and caboodle?
Definitely. And
Oh, cool.
especially, a lot of solar companies will work with several different kind of sales reps. So they'll have, inside and outside sales reps, and you're not always going to be able to convince everyone to start using Podio for their sales process. So I see a lot of people who are using something like Solo for their proposals and sales. So Podio makes it very easy to integrate with other services like that. So I've integrated Solo a bunch. That makes it really easy so that when a contract gets signed, you can then just kick it directly into Podio and then copy all of the information from that deal, so that you're not having to do a bunch of manual entry. The same goes for, if you are using Podio for your sales processes, you can also set up those flows, like Mac was saying, if the status goes to closed one or whatever status you're using as, the deal was signed, you can then just copy all of that project information into your project management space. And that way you're not having to do double entry to kind of manually copy over like what is going on with this project. So really, whatever you're using for your sales, you can easily get that funneled into this system without having to have somebody who's just typing everything in all over again.
Yeah, huge time saver. So whether it's using Podio for the full scale or for sort of the first touch, last touch, or being able to integrate with another system like that, because we are that open source platform, just that the amount of time that goes into double data entry. If anyone's been on a call with me before, they know that is the bane of my existence. So anytime we can really free flow that in is wonderful.
Definitely. Yeah, so the kind of idea on this workspace is to use this projects app as sort of the main hub that has all the other information for the project tied into it. So I'm going to go into projects first and just kind of show an example of what that looks like. If I hop into a sample project, I'll just kind of, walk through this. So we have, general customer information. How do we contact them? Where are we actually doing the installation? Just some basic contact information here. We have these nice section headers, which are done via a Podio calculation field, which kind of help visually break up the information. Anytime you have an app that has, a lot of different fields in it, I really like to use these because it helps you kind of visually find what you need. So we have project details, where are we in the project? So this example project we're looking at, we're in the inspection stage. Like Mac was explaining, that this is all completely customizable. So, I have some clients who have, 20 plus options in here. So you can get super granular with, how many different things you're tracking. Basic project information. This should look pretty familiar to all our solar companies. Um, we tie into a team app. So when you create an app for your team, that allows you to kind of assign roles to people. And then what you can do is set up relationships like this, which allow me to say, okay, let me only pick my project coordinators as part of this field. So it just helps you kind of create pick lists that house additional information for your team. Other basic system information. I'll highlight this a little later, but we have a database app where you can add all your different types of equipment and you can categorize it. So it's one database, but then you would categorize things by panels, inverters, or batteries. And that way you can kind of, just list out all of the different things that you might be installing. And then we have each of these three relationship fields filtered so that I can only pick my batteries from this list. I can only pick my inverters from this list, and panels, etc. So it's a way of letting you have things kind of in one place. But because we use filters, you can just create these custom drop downs. Adders, as I'm sure everyone knows, most solar projects will have, things that get tacked on as part of the installation. So we have this adder system, which, gives you these pick lists of things that you can add. There's ways of adding adders that have a fixed price. So, like you're usually charging the same amount for all MPUs, for example. But some things might have a custom price, such as re-roofs or trenching. So this system can handle all of that. And then once you get your adders kind of added in here, we have this calculation field, which kind of sums everything up just to give you kind of better at a glance, what's everything that needs to happen as part of this project. Project notes and updates, that's just an optional field if you want to kind of take some updates there. Some people also prefer to use the comment section here to put updates. It gives you kind of a nice chronological list. Only downside there really is sometimes that can get kind of clogged by the activity. You do have this filter here, but by default, you're seeing the activity and the comments. But just kind of an example of how your team might choose to do things one way or the other. Sales and finance information, just what was sold, who sold it, how much did they sell it for, and then how are they paying for it? Is it cash or is it going to be a finance deal? And then if it's finance, what are the terms? You can store all that here. Some companies that I work with prefer to take all of this information and store it in its own separate app, and sometimes even keep it in a separate workspace. Reason being, they don't necessarily want everybody who's working in projects to have access to finance information. They want to keep that a little bit more locked down. So that's one example of how you might restructure this a little bit differently depending on your own team's preferences and then how you want to control who has access to what.
Yeah, and
Project
that's kind of what I
stages.
was echoing in that
Yeah.
first stage of being able to link things across workspaces allows you to
Yep.
really control the visibility. So it allows you to have a lot more power over who has access to what while still keeping that tied together.
Exactly. So, my demo here has everything all in a single workspace, which means anybody that I add to that workspace is going to have full access to everything in here. But that doesn't work for everybody. So, if you need to keep certain things locked down, like finance information or commissions or anything like that, you can just create a separate workspace and then just add a subset of your team to that workspace of whoever needs to access that information. And you can still link all of that stuff to the project, so that you can easily get there while looking at the project. But then that way, only the people that you've added to that separate workspace are going to actually have access to it. So then we have the project stages here. So these are links to the other apps that were in my workspace. If I just back out here for a sec, and you'll see I have separate apps for different stages. That's going to be these four here. So site surveys, permits, installs, and inspections. This is, again, just a starting point. So, a lot of people like to add apps for other stages such as design or PTO, or, a bunch of other things. So really the sky's the limit. But these are just kind of like the four basics that pretty much everybody I've worked with needs a separate section to work on these. The benefits of having these separate, or there's a bunch of benefits, but number one is that you can have your site survey team only working out of this app and only giving them kind of like visibility on what they care about. So you can come into the site survey app and you could even switch the layout to show by calendar so that you can see kind of like what are your upcoming surveys, and then click through to see only the information on those site surveys. They'll still have access to project information if they need it. It's just one click away. But it kind of just gives people a nice subset of the data, because most, if you're going on a site survey, you don't want to be scrolling through all the project details. You kind of just want to have an area where you can add, what is your status, and then upload your photos, and take your notes. And then since these are done out in the field, if you're doing this from your mobile app, you can actually take pictures directly from that field, which is really nice because then you can just kind of click on it, take your photos, and then everything gets uploaded right here. So going back to my sample project, the stages section gives you a really nice bird's eye view on what's going on with that project. You can completely customize what's shown in these relationship field badges. You can show up to 5 fields. So you can see here, like site survey, I can see that's completed and it was done on May 1st at 2 p.m. Permit, I can see we've obtained it. Install, looks like we've got that scheduled for May 26th. So this is just a really good way of getting an overview if you're looking at a project and you want to know kind of, what's going on. This is a really easy snapshot for me to just see everything that has happened as part of this project. And then again, if you wanted to create separate apps for things like design or PTO or any other stage, you can also add links to those here so that you just have this really concise snapshot of everything that's going on as part of that project. I also have a metrics app, which is something that a lot of solar companies like to have. This is essentially just an app that collects a bunch of different dates. It's the dates that certain events occurred. This is a very basic starting point, but you can really get crazy with, how many different pieces of information you're storing. And this is all controlled via automation. So we have automations that say, for example, when a site survey is marked as completed, go to the metrics item and then update that with the current date. So this is all completely automated. And what that allows you to do is create reports such as, how many site surveys did we complete this month? How many installs did we complete this month? And what was the revenue per install? Things like that. So metrics is definitely something that gives you a lot of visibility into kind of overall numbers on what you've been installing, completing across all stages in the installation process.
And this would be great for bandwidth too, right, Jacquelyn, to get a good view of just how many you have going on at a certain point in time so you can make, proper installation date estimations for future jobs.
Definitely. And you can also run reports that show like how many installs have I done per month. So you can see kind of like over time, like per month, how many installations you're doing. So you can kind of track like, are we growing? Are we shrinking? Are we kind of staying the same? So you can get kind of like progressive data as well.
Yeah, like a
And
health
just kind
of
of helps you
business
track.
almost.
Yeah, exactly. Um, yeah, so the metrics app is definitely really important if you want to kind of get those types of reports to see kind of how things are going. So then I kind of touched on the database, but just to give you kind of more of a visual on what that looks like. So you can see I just have a few sample items here, but everything here is just kind of added on like, what's the name of it, what type is it, and then you can mark them as active or inactive. Let's say you stopped offering a certain type of panel. You could go into that panel and mark it as no longer used. And then when I was showing on those projects how you can have customized drop downs to only show your panels, you can have it so that it's only going to offer you your active panels as well. So it just makes it easier to make sure you're selecting the correct item on what happened on the project, just to keep kind of like your lists up to date without kind of having to delete items so that people aren't selecting the inactive ones. So that's it for the demo space. Again, I want to emphasize like this is a pretty typical starting point, but you can really organize things and add to it like however you want. And you can really like get way more granular and involved in the types of information that you want to track. So this is a great starting point, but there's so much more that you can do with it. There's so much more that you can automate, and you can really kind of fit this around all of like your own customized processes, which makes it a really great tool for solar just because everyone kind of has their own idea of how they want to organize things, and you're not forced into what Podio has decided is going to be like the way to structure things. Like you get to decide how things look and then how things are automated.
Wonderful. And there's one question for you, Jacquelyn, that I see in the Q&A. But with you being able to play a bit more than just native Podio, what data visualization apps would you recommend? So the two that were listed were Plecto and Power BI. I know that we do integrate very well with Plecto. It's a part of our voucher program, but can you speak to any
Mhm.
sort of recommendation you might have there?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I've worked with Plecto quite a lot. I haven't worked with Power BI, but I do recommend Plecto because it does have like a native integration. And if you're paying for Podio annually, you actually get a 6-month voucher to try it out, which is a long time to get to, set up your dashboards and decide if that's going to be a tool that will work for you. Um, I think Plecto is great. It gives you a little bit more. Like pretty reporting options. So for those who are unfamiliar with Plecto, it's a lot like a Tableau. It's a data visualization tool that allows you to build dashboards, and you can use that even on the pre-sale side to show things like what are my like upcoming deals like per rep, or like what is you can forecast revenue. It allows you to do things like pie charts, bar charts. So it's a great way of having kind of like live dashboards for all of your metrics. And you could even set up dashboards based on your metrics. So while you can set up reports directly from here, um, getting like a more visual tool can kind of just it can help keep people motivated because some people will have it like up on a TV in the office, or something like that. But yeah, I definitely can recommend Plecto. I can't say that I've worked a lot with any of the others, um, but I have no complaints about them. They've been great. Their support's really good as well. So anytime you need help setting something up, I usually find that they're pretty responsive on kind of helping you get things built out.
All right, wonderful. And last most important question as we're wrapping up here. Let's say someone's watched your presentation today. They absolutely love the way that you have these projects and these installations set up. How can they find you? How can they get a hold of you? How can they engage you?
Great. Yeah. So feel free to shoot me an email. I know Mac had my email at the beginning of the webinar. You can also go to my website, Zooli, ZOOLI.io. I do provide this template as a starting point. So if you'd like to just kind of get this as a really quick setup to get started, feel free to contact me to get this. You can also just use this as inspiration. I have a guide on my website to exactly how this is set up. So if you're kind of like more of a DIY type and you'd like to build things yourself, feel free to look up my guide and just use that to kind of help you get started. Um, and then if you have any questions or anything I can help with, more than happy to help you out. So just give me a shout out. There's a contact button on my website as well. So email or use my website. And I'm happy to help out however I can.
Wonderful. And if anyone is not currently a member of Podio now is interested in moving to our wonderful platform, you can go to podio.com. There should be an area there where you can request a demo. And as long as we can make sure that that works with our requirements, we can get a one-on-one meeting set up with you. Jacquelyn, thank you so much for your time today. I've been wanting to be able to highlight this for so long, so I really appreciate it. Everyone who's attending, thank you all very much. I know 30 minutes is a lot to give up.